Hi, I'm here with Ron Quaranta, the founder and chairman of the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance. We just held our AICPA CPA.com blockchain symposium with the WSBA's help this week. It's an event that offered updates and insights from thought leaders in the accounting finance space. Ron, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Jeff, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to get some of your takeaways on some of what we heard. So if we could just get right into it. You cited some pretty amazing stats during your presentation documenting the growth in the overall blockchain crypto asset space. Can you talk about what's behind this, unpack some of the numbers for us?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Jeff, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. I think we're seeing several trends that are emerging in this space, and you and I have been talking about blockchain and crypto assets, and I get the privilege of talking with lawyers and accountants and bankers and technologists. I think what we're seeing is what I call the broader adoption of crypto assets across different verticals in the marketplace. So for a long time, it was the realm of only crypto enthusiasts who would buy and sell Bitcoin, for example. But when you look at the news now, when you look at PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, different providers trying and working very hard to make crypto assets available to the general public with the protections and safeguards that the general public would need to participate in this new asset class. We're also looking at what I'll call broader institutional adoption. If you and I went to a bank, for example, 5 or 6 years ago when we started talking about this and said, look, you need to start allowing your customers to get access to crypto assets, you and I would have been thrown out of the room. It's a very different conversation today. Most major banks are in some way trying to understand what are the tools and access points that clients need? How do they get involved in this in a safe space? And from the perspective of global financial markets, it's not just Bitcoin anymore. There are thousands of these crypto assets. There are options, there are derivatives. So we're looking at the emergence of what we talked about several years ago, of a new asset class in my mind, and we're seeing that in the numbers. $1 trillion plus, I think it's $1.4 trillion global market cap as of this morning. In crypto assets, that was over 2 trillion at the height of the market. We're seeing analysis, we're seeing access to different instruments, and we're seeing that in the numbers, the ability to have a global capability that allows for trading and access and investment in crypto assets.
One thing that kind of is set against that backdrop that came up a bunch of times during the symposium is with the development of the technology, has that outstripped regulatory efforts? Is that true? How are policymakers doing at this point?
Yeah, I don't think it's a case that it's outstripped regulators per se. What I would argue, and Barry Melanson over at AICPA, it's a quote I use of his many times, that the pace of innovation will never be as slow as it is today. We're seeing that play out in real time in the crypto asset and blockchain markets. Innovations are happening very quickly. Things exist today, and I know we're going to talk about decentralized finance later, that didn't exist 18 months ago. But the interesting conversations that we're having at the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance with regulators really is reflective of two things. One is they want to maintain their mandates of protecting investors, which is critical. And as an organization, we support that 100%. But they also understand that they need to figure out a way to evolve regulation to protect those investors. So when you look at the major regulators, SEC, CFTC, IRS, from a taxation perspective, and others, they're setting up innovation offices. They're setting up innovation labs. So they're working to very deeply understand the technology and the innovations that are there. It's a struggle because the innovations are happening quickly. We're in the space, and it's hard to keep up with so many of the things that are happening. But our belief is that regulators really want to work with the industry to get this right. And industry participants are trying to be partners in those conversations.
We saw a bunch of demos during the symposium from innovative companies. I wanted to talk about one in particular, which is Blockchain Intelligence Group, which creates some forensic tools that law enforcement and presumably auditors could use to track terrorism, financial crimes, extortion. We hadn't seen that before. Can you talk about why tools like this are important, what it means for the maturation of the market?
Yeah, absolutely. And full disclosure, I know the Blockchain Intelligence Group team very well. They are members of the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance. I've known their team for several years. And I would encourage folks to look at them, look them up online, and certainly look at the other providers in this space. The key reason those tools are so important is there are a couple of reasons. One is it puts to rest what I'll call the broad misconception that everything in the crypto asset space, particularly public crypto like Bitcoin, are untraceable. They're solely tools for tax evasion, and that there's no way to trace these transactions. That's not correct. Anonymous, when we look at the Bitcoin blockchain, does not mean invisible. And so Blockchain Intelligence Group has built out a really potent series of tools that help law enforcement track illicit activity, help law enforcement create reports around what regions or wallet addresses are participating in illicit activity potentially. And from the audit perspective, when we look at the accounting profession, those are powerful tools. When the auditor has to come forward and track where transactions have happened or track who is in possession of a particular wallet, yes, there's still quite a bit of anonymity, for example, but the tools are there to engage in that level of forensics, which I think is very, very important. Blockchain Intelligence Group works with law enforcement all around the world, and there are other providers doing this. And the capabilities are really expanding into different industries. So I think those are the important reasons that Blockchain Intelligence Group was there, to show that those tools exist.
We heard a lot this year about DeFi, or decentralized finance. Can you give a thumbnail of that and just talk a little bit about the opportunities and challenges posed?
Yeah, absolutely. Decentralized finance, it used to be called open finance back in the day, and it shows you how long I've been in this business and how old I'm getting. But decentralized finance really conceptually is meant to replicate the operations of traditional financial markets. So think value exchange, think borrowing, think lending, capital raising, for example. But to do it in a way that essentially removes or minimizes intermediaries, it truly removes intermediaries, leveraging blockchain technology and leveraging smart contract technology. We published the WSBA. We worked with our partners and colleagues at CPA and CPA.com. We published a primer on decentralized finance for the accounting professional, which I think is worth looking at for anyone who's remotely interested. And it's interesting to see that progression. This goes back to the point we made earlier, Jeff, about the pace of innovation. 2 years ago, no one was talking about DeFi, maybe the small core of technology enthusiasts. Today, I think something on the order of $55 billion is engaged in the large decentralized finance world, which is great from a capabilities perspective and a new assets perspective, but that does open up a whole series of challenges. It opens up challenges for regulators when they don't have intermediaries and peer-to-peer transactions are happening. It opens up challenges and opportunities for the accounting profession, in my mind, to be that trusted source, potentially for clients that are trying to understand DeFi, trying to understand how to analyze the data, trying to understand how to report on that data. We haven't even touched on how do you tax decentralized financial transactions. So it really, that whole area ties together a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, Jeff. Reporting and the accounting profession and the opening up of opportunities in the wake of a new market. My personal opinion is that decentralized finance will be the catalyst for global evolution in different parts of the market, particularly banking and finance. And the accounting profession needs to be at that table.
You talked about the DeFi white paper that you put out, but how can our listeners keep up on the latest developments overall in the blockchain crypto space?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'll be particularly self-serving. Obviously, the Wall Street Blockchain Alliance publishes quite a bit of material. Much of that is publicly available, and certainly reach us at info@wsba.co. AICPA, Jeff, as you know, and CPA.com have published quite extensive material learning about blockchain and crypto assets, including, I believe, some of it's CPE eligible. That's worth looking at. There's a lot of noise in the industry, so it's always hard to parse through different sources. I have preferred favorites personally. I think CoinDesk does a great job from a research and news reporting perspective. Forbes has a wonderful, potent team of reporters in this space and analysis. For those who want to get more granular, something called The Block is an interesting newsletter. A gentleman named Pompliano, who's deeply involved in the market, does a lot of market analysis. There are others. And at the technology level, Jeff, I would also argue that a lot of our partners, Hyperledger, R3, and others, they publish publicly facing material on their websites all the time. Happy to share those links as well. But it's a fast-moving space. It's worth dedicating a little time to the research.
Ron, thanks so much for joining us and helping us break things down. Always appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Jeff. Great to see you again.